Hi, it's Gordon here with week 30 of 2012, a year with Mya-Moe Unscripted. This week I'm going to get into a topic that, I'm sure people do PhDs on, and so 5 minutes on YouTube isn't nearly enough. I'm going to touch some highlights, and the topic is the perception of loudness in an instrument. So let me start by saying that perception is reality in the mind of the perceiver. In other words, what you like is what you like. And that is all that is important. With that having been said, loudness is a very interesting thing. People think it may be scientific, but it's not. Loudness is absolutely perceptual. Every person has a different perception of loudness. Our ears are all a little bit different in terms of how they respond to different notes, different tones and frequencies. And as we age, the response of our ear changes. What we like is also part of that perception. Now, in most people, the fact is that if you look at the frequency range of the ukulele, so from the lowest note, let's call it a low G, all the way to a highest note, if those two notes are played at the same technical volume, that is, I measure them with a meter and I play them, I'm able to play them at the same volume. The fact is that our ears will hear a tone that is 4 times different in loudness. So there's that much difference in our perception over the range of frequencies on the ukulele. The high note will sound much louder, 4 times louder than the low note. So what does this mean to us as players and designers? Well, part of it is what are we aiming for? What kind of response across the instrument are we looking to achieve? Well, at Mya-Moe, part of the tone that we're trying to achieve is a flat response, perceived response across the breadth of the ukulele. That means that we want to tone down the highs a bit and we want to boost the lows. You may remember in stereos, I don't know if they still have this, but there used to be a loudness button. Well, that compensated for that perceived loudness in your ear across the frequency spectrum, especially at low volumes. Think of also going out to hear music or playing music in your own house. You know, there are times where you think, man, that's just too loud and it's got to be turned down. Often that's not an issue that it is actually technically too loud, but rather that it is too brittle, especially in the highs, and it's hurting our ears. That comes from, if you're out to see music, a sound system that is not very good, or a venue which does not have great acoustics, maybe very ringy, or again, brittle, maybe a lot of windows. In your home stereo, it comes from a stereo that is not as high quality as is possible. The higher quality venues and at home, the higher quality sound systems and speakers are looking for a flat response across the frequency spectrum. So that's what many people, that's what we are trying to achieve. And again, that means boosting up the bass and lowering the treble. It also means that sometimes you'll hear ukulele and say, wow, that's loud. And oftentimes, it's not necessarily an expensive ukulele, and it may be an older ukulele. Those instruments tend to have, they tend to have a lot of highs in them, a lot of high frequency. They tend to be at times brittle or even tinny. But to our ear, that sounds loud, not necessarily pleasing, but loud. And so there can be a difference. I mean, what are you trying to make a ukulele that is perceived as being the loudest? And a lot of people, that's their measure. They'll get their ukulele and say, oh, it's louder than I thought, or it's not as loud as my other ukulele. We got an email this week from a person that said, I love the tone. I'm not getting as much loudness as I expected. Well, the fact is that in our ukuleles, often they will be perceived to not have as much volume as you're used to. And the reason is that we are trying to provide that tone across the breadth of the notes from that G, be it low or high, but obviously the low G is lower on the frequency scale, but all the way from that lowest note, I guess you'd say C on a high G instrument, so all the way from that lowest note to the very highest note, we want it to be balanced. And that is really, in the end, what we're looking for in the Mya-Moe tone is balance. And we'll often talk of the instruments that are a 4 on our 1 to 7 scale, and we'll say that they are the most balanced. And what we mean by that is they are providing what you perceive to be a nice balance across the range of frequencies. We don't want to have notes that they call them wolf notes that stand out as being loud. And I don't want it to stand out as you go up that A string. I don't want it to jump out at you as being too loud or bright or brittle. So that's a little bit of a touch on a very deep subject. Perception of loudness and actual loudness and frequency spectrum and so forth. And I'm sure that I will touch on this subject more as the year goes by. Anyway, thanks, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.